Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this very special episode of My Next Question, National Jewelers webinar series sponsored by Rdi Diamonds. Today's session is hosted by Senior Editor Gemstones, Brecken Brandstrada, Associate Editor Lenore Fido, and me, Editor-in-Chief Michelle Graff. Our fourth staff writer, Senior Editor Ashley Davis, was unfortunately out today, so she won't be able to join us. We are bringing you a year-end wrap-up. For the next 30 minutes or so, we'll be talking about our favorite stories and moments from 2020, as well as offering our predictions for 2021. This session was taped in advance, but one of our editors will be in attendance today to answer any viewer questions. In addition, this session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website on Wednesday, December 30th. So without any further ado, let's get started. Hi, Brecken. Hi, Lenore.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
So I thought we could start maybe by talking a little bit about what we as individuals have been up to this year, since we haven't seen anybody. We didn't do our usual round of trade shows. So I thought it might be good to catch people up on us a little bit, where we are, what we've been doing, how we've been keeping busy. Brecken, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think like many people sort of personally spent the year working on my apartment. I think it was this, you had so little control over things that I threw myself into house projects. So I did a lot of painting and updating and that kind of thing, which was really nice. And then on a more work-related basis, I also had just started enrolling in my GG classes when the pandemic hit. So the silver lining of the whole work from home situation was that I had very few distractions to pull me away from my classes on the weekends. So I've really been
really to do.
Yeah. So I've really been sort of able to move through those, and focus on them, which has been really nice. So that's the exciting thing for 2020 for me.
Okay. Lenore, what have you been up to? I mean, I have an idea, but you can tell our viewers.
Not anything all that exciting. I spend a lot of time at home now, obviously. So I've been doing a little more cooking and baking, experimenting with some recipes I haven't tried before, or things that I thought maybe took a little too long, but now I have all the time in the world, so I might as well try it out. And I get to spend more time with my family, my dog, Rock. That's been nice. So, the upside is that it has been nice to, be home and spend more time with my family and everyone. But I'm looking forward to getting back to the outside world at some point.
Yeah, I think we all are.
Yeah.
For me, I've been doing a lot of what Brecken described. I actually moved from one apartment in Brooklyn to another. So that's been kind of something I've spent a lot of time on. I don't think I've ever spent as much time on like Bed Bath & Beyond's website looking at things to organize my house. But, it's like a lot of people very home focused this year. I adopted a little kitty. I know everyone knows, but his name is Salem, and he's quite adorable. So he's also having a kitten's a lot like having a child, I think. So he's been taking up a lot of my time, but it's been really enjoyable. But yeah, I too am kind of looking forward to getting through this coming winter, and then looking forward to getting back into some kind of normalcy, if that's the summer or next fall. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's definitely something I'm looking forward to in 2021. So I want to talk a little bit about, this is a year-end wrap-up webinar, as I mentioned. So let's talk a little bit about our favorite stories from 2020. I want to start with your favorite stories, Brecken and Lenore, that you personally authored, and a little bit about why. And Lenore, I'll go to you first with this one.
Sure. This feels like it was a million years ago, but I wrote a story in February about Victoria's Secret and the problems that they've been having. The company has been called out, and rightfully so, for a while about their lack of diversity, whether, you're talking race, age, body type, you name it. And I really liked that story because I think it brought to the forefront this idea that it's becoming more and more important for consumers to see themselves represented by brands. And I just think that, or I hope that the story does a good job of sort of showing what can happen when an aspirational brand sort of becomes a little more exclusionary. And, that it's more than, just being not nice. I think it's really going to hurt your business if you can't find ways to evolve and be more inclusive. So yeah, that was my favorite story that I worked on this year. It felt like an important one to do.
Yeah, I love that story as well as an editor. Bracken, your favorite story from your kind of stable of entries this year?
I really struggled with this one because I have a lot of favorites, not surprisingly.
Oh, I
Okay.
thought you.
Only pick
Okay, then.
one. But I just meant because, I do that 5 things to know about series. And obviously, like, that just ends up being so much fun to write because I learned so much. But because that's a whole series and it's sort of regular, I won't pick one of those yet. I think one will come up later. So I ended up picking also a story that I did way back early this year, before Tucson. So it felt like a different lifetime. But my favorite story was the baby Gemstone mobile from Shelley Sargent. It's Somewhere in the Rainbow.
Yeah.
Because it was just something that was so different from what I had covered. She was just so much fun to talk to. And then when everybody gathered in Tucson to look at it and all the cutters were taking pictures, it also just sort of really represented this market of these independent cutters and the work that they were doing and how much people love it and are really looking towards it. So I think that might have been one of my favorites, if not my favorite of the year.
Yeah, I can't believe that was this year.
Mhm.
And the same thing with your story, Lenore, which I loved. I feel like we mentioned this before we started recording, but anything that was written before lockdown feels like it was a lifetime ago.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So I picked 2 for myself.
Okay.
But I did one from the magazine and one from the web. So for the magazine, I'm going to go with my story on lab-grown diamonds that was from the market issue. I worked really hard on that, and I feel like that's an issue. We've written, I mean, it's obviously lab-grown diamonds are going to be, they are, and they're going to continue to be a big part of the industry. And we've written about it, here and there a little bit, but I hadn't had the chance yet to sit down and really write like a big analysis piece. And this is kind of just looking at, lab-grown diamonds are part of the industry, deal with it. Here are the pros, here are the cons, here are the things to know if you want to sell them in your store, and just kind of living in that and not getting into all the back and forth debate that sometimes comes up that I think is kind of pointless, honestly. So I really like that. And that was also like interesting because, I mean, people on the outside don't know this, but we as editors know our market issue was obviously originally supposed to run in conjunction with Vegas. And that didn't happen. So we had to kind of push that back. And I thought everybody did a great job in kind of adjusting their stories. So that was a story that I had done and then had to kind of redo parts of it to make it make sense with the magazine, which then came out after Vegas, or excuse me, after what would have been Vegas. For the web, I'm going to have to go with, I did a blog post from April, I believe, and it was 5 interesting facts about diamonds. I felt like when the pandemic first started, I had time to attend a lot of these webinars. I think the webinars, especially this one, are fabulous. As the years gone on, we've kind of piled on projects and I haven't had as much time to attend these, but this GIA one earlier in the year, I thought was fascinating. And I just was really happy with the story that came out of it. And I thought, especially in the beginning when things were just getting started with the lockdown, I thought everybody had a lot of time to attend webinars and we had a lot of great content come out of them. So now we're going to stay on favorite stories, but we're going to pivot to, what is your favorite story that one of the other editors wrote? And Bracken, you can go first on this one.
Okay. I picked, this is hard because you're all such great writers. I think when I was trying to recall, reading a story and how much fun I had reading it as well, or how much it taught me. And I really enjoyed, back in, I think it was April, Ashley did a story about Lauren Kolchinsky-Levinson, who we know now runs the store Mayfair Rocks, but it was the profile of her as the jewelry stylist for The Sopranos. And so it was such a cool thing to get that behind the scenes look and, this sort of pop culture thing that we all love, but probably don't get to do as much and that kind of thing. So I really thought that one was a lot of fun. And I know it got a lot of good reception too from our readers.
And it's still, I still see it, like people are still reading it like every day. And, when I'm looking at the analytics, somebody's still on that story because it's, awesome. There's probably tons of people watching for the first time or rewatching The Sopranos and are like, oh, what's the jewelry in here? This is great jewelry. I'm sorry, Lenore, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So this was hard to pick one, but I'm a huge fan of Brecken's 5 Things to Know series. So I think my favorite of this year was, she did 5 Things to Know about Fordite. And I really, really loved that one. she talks about it, sort of as like a slice of American history, where it comes from, how it's made, and, how it's being upcycled now. Yeah, so that was my favorite that someone else wrote this year. I thought that was just really fascinating.
That was such a fun one to write. And it just had the perfect combination of, like the American, like you were saying, the history, and also people looking for stuff that's closer to home and just being really interesting.
And those Marla Aaron locks with the Fordite. First of all, love everything
Well,
Marla does, but those
right.
Marla Aaron locks with the Fordite were out of this world.
Yeah,
They were
there's some
great.
pretty incredible jewels made with it now, so that doesn't hurt.
Yeah. So for me, this is funny because I actually can't pick one because I think you're all great writers and you all cover something different. So I can't say, one, it's just hard for me because I think you each bring something different and you each cover different beats, right? So,
Right.
it's hard to compare a fashion story to a story about like how the pandemic has infected artisanal colored gemstone miners in Africa to pick something about, the takeover of Tiffany by LVMH or acquisition of Tiffany by LVMH. Like it's too hard for me. So I picked one for you each. And they have actually great minds, I guess, because they've actually all been mentioned. Bracken, for you, I picked 5 things to know about Fordite. I love that too. I thought the jewelry was interesting. And that's another one that like people are interested in. That one also just continues to generate traffic for us, which also makes me love it. For Ashley, I picked The Sopranos, far and away like one of my favorite stories of the lockdown period. I was rereading it this morning before we taped this.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, that was such a good story. And like, I love the genesis of the story, which was Ashley at some point, we missed you today, Ashley. Ashley at some point said like, somebody recommend a classic HBO series for me to watch. And then she was like, oh, I'm going to watch The Sopranos. I haven't seen it before. And then it kind of just led into this thing where everyone was trying to kind of tie their quarantine experience into their writing experience, and I did a couple articles, everyone did a few articles in this vein. And I just thought that one was incredible. The interview was great. The images were great. And as I said, like it's still getting hits. And then Lenore, for you, the Victoria's Secret story. And I was looking through your stories for the year and it was between this and one of your Tiffany LVMH stories. But I went with this one because I love when you guys like put a personal touch, like make it about retail or make it about gemstones, make it about fashion, but bring something personal to it. And I just thought that was such a great story, Lenore. And I think it's still so like it only became more germane as the year went on because this idea of being inclusive and acceptance and having diversity in advertising in your company is only becoming more important. And those are a lot of points you hit on in that story. But again, I also came up against that thing where when I thought about that story, I was convinced that it was last year, but it was actually
I wasn't going to
February.
include it.
I wasn't going to include it. I was like, I want to do that Victoria's Secret story for last year, but that's 2019. And it didn't, it just, it just seems like it was 1,000 years ago now. And I don't know what's with time this year, but it's really strange. So now I want to move on to, I've mentioned kind of a little bit of, stories that have been generating traffic, but what is a story you did that you were really proud of, worked really hard on, and it just kind of dead in the water? And that happens sometimes. Like we work on something, we're like, oh, people are really going to like this. This is a great story. It's going to get a lot of play. And then just radio silence. Can you think of anything, and Lenore, I'm going to start with you, that you did that you thought was going to generate more interest in the trade than it did?
Yeah, I mean, that does happen sometimes. And I think the first one that comes to mind is I did a story, don't remember when, don't remember how time works, but it was about how to safely pierce ears during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really, really fun story. I really enjoyed writing it. And I spoke to 2 really interesting people. I spoke with Keisha Caffey of Piercing Pagoda, and then Brian
Keisha's great.
Thompson. She is. And then Brian Keith Thompson of Body Electric Tattoo in Los Angeles. They're both super interesting people. They had a lot to add. I mean, it was a story that was different from a lot of the other coverage that I'd been seeing in other publications. And yeah, I thought it was going to do a lot better than it did. And I was a little disappointed that it sort of fizzled, because I mean, it was an interesting story. It had great images. It just didn't click the way that I thought it would.
Yeah, no, I agree on that one. I thought that one was great too. And I thought that was an issue people would care about, because that's obviously like a very personal thing that some jewelers offer that you kind of have to rethink now. Yeah, I agree on that one. Brecken, what was your flop?
Well, I want to put the caveat that I think this is not that it flopped or that I didn't get any feedback on it, because I got a lot of engagement from the people that were sort of involved in it. But I think the only reason I didn't pick my State of the Major stories for what maybe my favorite of the year is because I wish that it had gotten more eyes, and I'm saying that purely as the online aspect. Obviously, we sent it out in print, and so all those people are looking at it. But my hope had been, when we published it, that it was really going to generate conversation, and it did within a certain community. But I wish that it had reached a wider audience and more circulation, and that more people had sort of engaged with it to figure out a conversation around how to prevent that in the future, how to work towards things. So I guess that's the one maybe I wish had gotten a little bit more eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I picked two. Again, I guess I can't help myself. But for me, mine was also my State of the Major story on diversity, equity, inclusion, why they matter. I worked really hard on that. We took a lot of time to think about how we wanted to talk about that subject. Race is a tough thing to talk about. You want to do it right, and you want to do it in a way that's going to make a lasting change and make people think about it, not kind of a one-shot Instagram post or something. So I worked really hard. I was really happy. I interviewed a lot of different people. I was really happy with how it turned out. And then it just didn't get the reception that I was hoping, which is really disappointing on so many levels. I also think with a story like that, it usually ends up being the people who are already in tune with that kind of thing who end up reading it, and the people who really need to hear the message don't. Which is disappointing, but not something I can change. And then the other story I did that, I kind of get it, but I did a Q&A with Kate Moore, who wrote a book about the Radium girls. And I think that's such an interesting story. And that just, it was a lot of work. I read the book. I set up this interview with her in London. She sent me a lot of great pictures, and that just didn't get the play I was hoping. It's a really interesting story about the young women who used to paint radium onto watch dials in factories in New Jersey, and I think it was Illinois, and they were encouraged to put the brushes in their mouth to bring them to a fine point so they could paint the watch dials. They were ingesting all this radium, and the companies knew it was dangerous, and they let them do it anyway, which is like echoes of so many things we saw going on this year at certain workplaces with the pandemic. But, people read what they read, I guess. And, just FYI, there's a Radium Girls movie out now. The story's very different it's more fictionalized, and it's very different from Kate's book, which is nonfiction. But, if anybody wants to stream that or check that out, I mean, if you're looking for something to read, it's called The Radium Girls by Kate Moore. Totally recommend it. So I want to talk a little bit now, too, about surprises, but pleasant surprises. How about that? What was a story you did this year and it was just kind of, just cranked it out, put it out there, didn't think much about it, and then it ended up getting a ton of traffic? Brecken, can you think of anything?
I think a few came to mind, and one of them was that every year when I'm in Tucson, I go to a session from Richard Drucker and of Gem Guide, and he and Stuart Robertson do this update where they just give market trends. And education sessions for us are so good because if it's full of great content, you can really just churn out a story pretty quickly. And it was like a live update from Tucson, and it was something that I sort of turned in and kept going, and it ended up getting a pretty good response, if I recall, at the beginning of the year, just because it offered things like pricing and trends and what's happening in sourcing, and it covered a lot of different areas. So I was really happy with that. It was an hour very well spent. And then there was one other thing, in that I think early days, I want to say, actually, what is time? I don't remember when I sat through it, but GIA in their knowledge session, they did, Aaron Palke did a session about field gemology and what to know. And you guys know that field gemology I'm obsessed with. I find it so interesting. So I sat through that, and then I did a roundup on things I had learned. And he also shared it to the GIA Facebook page, which certainly helped, I'm sure, as like a roundup. And it got a really, really good response. So that was also just, those were just fairly simple, and I enjoyed them a lot. So that was a nice response.
Yeah, those are both good ones. And I remember that. I remember them both, but I remember the one from Tucson, which is unbelievable to think that you went to Tucson this year.
I know, and that we were talking about things other than COVID, right? I was like,
yeah, all lost in the wash. Lenore, a story you put out that you thought just kind of dashed off and then it ended up being really big?
Yeah. So this one was a little bit of a surprise for me. It was I had written a blog earlier in the year about protective jewelry through the ages, like things that
Oh,
people have
yeah.
worn, to protect themselves from, bad luck or evil spirits. Things like these Native American turtle amulets or these Italian horns that are really popular. And it's just sort of one of those niche topics that I'm really into, but I wasn't sure like what sort of reception it was going to get from our audience. But it did, as far as I remember, it did pretty well. And it still pops up, now and then. And I think maybe because this year, because of everything going on, I think people are looking, for some more protective jewelry like talismans, amulets, evil eyes. Those are all still super popular.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, that was a surprising one, but a pleasant surprise. I mean, it's nice that there are people out there who also find this stuff interesting.
Yeah, that actually was a competitor for me, Lenore, for one of my favorite stories from you for the year, because I really enjoyed that too. And you're right, it does, like, it has a life of its own. And I think like in this
Timed.
year especially. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brecken.
I was just going to say it was so perfectly timed. I honestly didn't realize that was one that fell within 2020, but that was such a fun one. And to your point, everyone is thinking about that kind of thing now, so it was perfect.
Yeah, that was a really enjoyable story. So for mine, I'm going to pick something I didn't write, but Ashley wrote. I got to go with Gwen Stefani's engagement ring because, we're always kind of on the fence when a celebrity gets engaged. Like,
yeah,
can we get pictures? Like, how much information can we get? How much information can we get that isn't already being reported everywhere else? Like, who is somebody that people are kind of widely interested in? And I just remember Ashley and she's like, yeah, sure, I'll do something on Gwen's ring. I like Gwen. And, I like Gwen. I was rocking out to No Doubt in my dorm room freshman year of college, dating myself here. But and I just remember she just did it real quickly. It was a great story. We just kind of like, yeah, we'll do this. And then it ended up being, I think, the second most traffic story on our website this year. I'd have to look at the stats, but that one blew me out of the water. I mean, not that she's not famous, but I didn't know that there would be, I mean, maybe because her relationship is kind of famous and she's on The Voice now, but I think of her as being kind of an icon of like my time. So right. I didn't know that there was going to be still so much interest in her and her engagement ring.
Right.
And I mean, it was really cool to see. I just didn't know how many people were still like interested enough in her in the current times to look at it. But apparently a lot of people Google Gwen Stefani engagement ring. It is lovely.
Yeah.
So, so before we get into our 2021 predictions, I just want to say thank you again to Rdi Diamonds, who is our sponsor for this webinar series. And I want to say a quick word about them. Rdi Diamonds, the selection you want, the quality you need. Thousands of diamonds, that's just the beginning. RDI offers a wide range of services in sport to help you succeed, from flexible memo options, a partnership with the Beers Group Industry Services, to generous stock options and cost-efficient shipping. RDI's goal is to provide the highest quality of both care and diamonds to your store. For more information, visit rdidiamonds.com, and that is rdidiamonds.com. Thank you again for sponsoring our webinar this year. Now, let's gaze into our crystal balls here. I want to look at each of your areas of specialty, Brecken colored stones, Lenore retail, and I want you to talk a little bit about what is your prediction for 2021? And it might be kind of hard to see. You can talk about the whole year. You can talk about the first half, the back half, whatever you feel comfortable. And Lenore, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, retail predictions are a little bit difficult to do. But I think for 2021, what we're going to see is in-store shopping come back closer to the level where it was. I don't think we'll all be, shopping online forever. I think the in-store shopping experience is obviously going to look different. And I talked about this a little bit in my State of the Major story about, what is going to change about physical retail. But I think in short that we're going to see a lot more of this blend of in-store and online shopping. So, things like buy online, pick up in store, or curbside pickup, those things have already been gaining a lot of steam during the pandemic. And I think they're going to continue to do so. I think now that, more people know that those things are an option and they're sort of familiarizing themselves with them, I think it's going to continue to be pretty popular. But
yeah, I mean, I know for myself personally, I just want to say this is not jewelry related, but I started using, we'll just buzz market Instacart
Right.
during the pandemic for grocery shopping. I honestly don't know why I'd ever set foot in a grocery store again. I mean,
I
especially
think a
living
lot
in
of
New
people are
York.
going to feel that way. Yeah.
Yeah, especially living in New York City with no car. I mean, Lenore, you both know about this, going and like buying all this heavy stuff and then being like, oh, I overbought and I have to carry all this stuff home. Like, not doing that anymore.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure you're not going to be the only one. Um, but yeah, I think the in-store shopping experience is going to depend a lot upon how quickly people are going to be vaccinated, and then also how quickly people are just going to start to feel comfortable again, being in close quarters with other people. So I think maybe the first half of 2021 is going to be pretty similar to what we're seeing now. But then I think the later half, as the vaccines start to roll out, I think we're going to see in-store shopping bounce back a little bit. So
Okay.
that's my prediction so far.
Oh, gaze in your crystal ball. You see people in stores.
I
Bracken,
do.
what do you see in your crystal ball?
Well, I think I would sort of reiterate what Lenore was saying about the first half of the year. I expect it'll be just about the same. I think that it's obviously going to take some time for this supply chain in colored stones to straighten itself out. I think once people are able to go back to buying and sourcing in whatever normal level that is, that it's going to take a while for things to start moving through. And maybe even longer. I think it's going to take a lot of trickle down to the early stages of the supply chain, and for pricing to level out. But I think I'm also kind of excited to see how, I don't know if I have predictions for it yet because it's still sort of early, but to see how the market continues to develop and adapt in terms of paths to buying. A lot of the conversations we were having now, or I was having in 2020, revolved around, how do you buy at times when you can't travel? So there was conversation about these new methods of virtually buying, those platforms that I wrote about, and people who are really excited to try that. And then there are people who were saying, well, I don't want to do, I'm not interested in not buying anything that I don't see in person. And then when I was talking in my last webinar to the 3 lapidaries that were kind enough to join me, they were saying, well, we have, we've known our people long enough, we've sourced from these people long enough that we trust them, that, I can just source from them now whenever I need to. So really, what's the future of trade shows, and do we need to be going to them? Even in colored stone worlds, it's the same. So I'm kind of excited to see where that goes. And I think that'll probably be a huge theme throughout 2021 for me to keep an eye on.
I mean, this was a question we were asking, and I think we had an article by this title even before the pandemic. What is the future of trade shows? And I think that's a question that's only been brought into sharper focus by everything that's happened this year.
Yeah.
Like, the internet wasn't just invented this year. Like, I think this year just kind of like made it a reality. Like, oh, right, I don't really need to be going to all these places to buy gemstones or buy jewelry. Although people will still want to meet in person and see each other, but I think things are going to evolve and change. Like, I think one of the big takeaways in ways of prediction for me is that I don't think things are going to go back to the way they were ever. I think, that ship has sailed. We've kind of left that land and we're headed somewhere else now. And then, it's scary, but like with anything else, like you adjust and then that becomes a new normal and you forget the way things used to be before that.
Right. Right. When you've changed how your business operates to work now, and say travel budget is cut down for these companies, it's like, well, why would they go back to that? I think it'll just be a more curated of maybe one show here, and for colored stone dealers, maybe traveling to two big markets and then figuring the rest out. But
that's a really good point with people's budgets. Like, people's budgets could be tight. So, but we're gonna get into trade shows in a little bit. My prediction has to do with, I covered diamonds mostly. So my prediction has to do with the diamond market specifically. I think 2 things are going to happen. Like, number one, right now, the diamond market's kind of on a party. We talked to all these jewelers, kind of the higher end jewelers, and I'll get to that point in a minute. But right now they're seeing a lot of purchasing because everybody that wanted to take that 50th anniversary trip to Italy didn't go. So there's money being spent on jewelry because jewelry makes people happy, and you can, see jewelry on Zoom calls. And it's a way to celebrate a birthday or anniversary in a year where maybe you want to take somebody whitewater rafting or overseas and you can't do that. And it's a way that, it's still something that's special, more special than a piece of clothing or an iPhone, but it's like the next best thing to a trip for some people. But I think that party is going to come to an end at some point, right? When people can travel again. And I think the industry is going to have a little bit of a hangover. There's going to be a hangover where when people really can start traveling again, that's where all their money is going to go. And like, we're going to see that's going to hit jewelry sales. And I don't know if that's a 2021 thing, or maybe that's more of a 2022 thing. That's number one. And number two, I think we don't talk enough about, when we talk about the jewelers doing well, yes, there are jewelers doing well, but there are also jewelers really struggling because there's a lot of people really struggling. And the United States already was in a position where the middle class was shrinking. We've written about this for years. So I think the pandemic has exacerbated the valley between the haves and the have-nots. And I think that's something that's going to play out in the jewelry market as well.
Yeah.
And I don't know how exactly that's going to look, but there's a lot of people that made a lot of money during this pandemic, and then there's a lot of people who lost everything.
Yeah.
And that's
what we were hearing.
We haven't seen how that is all going to shake out quite yet.
Yeah. Definitely a tale of I think across all retail, right? Where it was like we were seeing stories, not only the ones we were writing, of like people are still buying so much fine jewelry, especially online e-commerce, as they were in the pandemic. And then at the same time, you just had a lot of smaller places that were dying and closing. So I think that's a great point, Michelle.
Yeah. So I think that's something that we'll start to see play out. But these might be more 2022 predictions too. I think you were both right when you said the first half of 2021 anyway is definitely going to be a lot like 2020. The vaccine is great, but it's not going to fix everything, and it's not going to fix everything instantly.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay. So now we talked a little bit about your predictions. So we kind of dipped our toe into this a little bit in the past discussion, but what do you see happening with not just trade shows, but industry events? Like, when do you see those resuming in 2021, if at all? Brecken, what do you think?
I think my guess is probably going to be similar to you guys, because we've chatted about this, every time we cover so much of these show closings, and I think we have a better insight into, I don't know, maybe how close it gets or what goes into it. And my guess is going to be that it'll be maybe in the summer when enough people, as the vaccine rolls out. Obviously we can't all jump out into events right away, but my guess is that as Vegas starts rolling around again, because it's a big enough market and it's important enough to enough people, that there will at least be the conversation of, is it doable? And then to that point, the rest of the summer events that we get to enjoy, at least I hope. What are your thoughts, Lenore? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, when they come back and when I feel comfortable going back, I think are two different things. I think we will definitely see more events coming as the weather warms up, definitely in the spring and the summer. I don't know. I mean, I think there's just so much up in the air right now. And I think whether or not I'm going to attend an event, it's not so much a cut and dry thing. I think it sort of depends on the event itself. Like, where is the venue? How far do I have to travel? Is it appointment only? Are there a bunch of people there? Like, what kind of precautions are you taking?
Is it inside, outside? Is there like an outside component where I can be outside if I don't want to be inside?
Right. So for me, it's not really like yes or no. Like, I have a lot of questions that I need answers to before I know whether I'm going to go to a show or not. But as far as when they're going to happen, I would agree. I think the later half of the year, like spring, summer. Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, I think we're in this thing for a full 2 years. So I don't see, I don't know. I don't really see people gathering until maybe like this time next year. And that would be a full 2 years, because this really started, if we want to take it back, the first case of what was then just called coronavirus was right around this time last year. So in my mind, I feel like the world is in this pandemic. We're in this pandemic for a full 2 years. Maybe there'll be some kind of like smaller gatherings in the spring, or not even spring, I think summer and fall. But I feel like we're in this kind of altered state of reality for most, if not all of 2021. And I hate to be depressing, but I think it's just the reality of it. And I think this is kind of just like the course of a pandemic.
No, I definitely think you're right. To be what most people like expect us to still be wearing masks through most of the year, because even once they vaccinate, you still have to, until enough people are, you still have to, right? So I think you're probably right. But maybe as there are smaller events, people just we go back to wearing our masks later in the year. And I don't know, be very interesting.
Be interesting to see too, like how many people choose to, even after this is over, to continue to wear masks on planes, or like I was even thinking like on public transportation. I'm like, like maybe it's not a bad idea for us to have a mask on the subway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like not touching the poles in general or something like that. Like,
and I mean also like, or on an airplane, like maybe that's a good idea too. Like, maybe it's not, I mean, maybe not on a super long flight, but if you're just going to fly from like New York to Atlanta, maybe not such a bad idea to wear a mask. I don't know. I mean, it'll be, like I said, like we're entering into an unknown land. We're going somewhere we haven't been before. And we don't know what's there because we haven't gone yet. So it'll be interesting to see. So I want to wrap up with something a little more upbeat, a little more fun. So let's talk about like, something that happened to us this year that was interesting, or as interesting as possibly could have been for 2020. And also tell me some of the stuff that's been entertaining you. Best book you've read, best movie you've watched, best series you've streamed. Just something in case people, because again, we're going to be in this for the winter at least. So maybe people need a little entertainment suggestion. Lenore?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to end on a positive note here, I think just in general, one of the more positive things for me this year was just getting to spend more time with my family. When I go into the office, 5 days a week, that's a huge chunk of my time that I'm not at home, that I'm not with them. So yeah, I mean, on the bright side, it has been really nice to spend more time with my family. As far as some favorite things that I did this year, jewelry event wise, I really enjoyed the virtual New York City Jewelry Week events. They had a ton of sessions going on, and there were like quite a few that I really liked watching. So I thought that was good. Things that I have been doing outside of work. I haven't read a lot of books that were out this year per se, but I did read Rob Bates' new book, Murder.
Oh, shout out for Rob.
I do have it here. So just, and I wouldn't plug it if I didn't like it. I am genuinely enjoying it. And I think a lot of people in the industry are going to have a lot of fun reading it. Yeah, it's a super fun, like murder mystery story. I've had a lot of fun with it so far. I'm nearly done. Yeah, so that was a favorite of mine for the year. I'll have to think a little harder on some TV shows or movies that I really liked.
Yeah, and congratulations again to Rob. I think it's an awesome accomplishment.
Yeah.
I struggle just to get my daily work done, and my brother writes books too, so I totally understand how hard it is to write something and how doubly hard it is to get it published. So that's awesome, and that's actually on my to-do list is to order Rob's book because I want to read it over the Christmas break.
I recommend it for sure.
We can have a discussion about it as soon as we can be like an NJ book club.
Book club.
Oh, fun. 2021 to do.
Yeah, there we go.
Bracken, entertainment.
Okay. Well, I actually leaned really heavily on reading. I'm already a big reader, but there was something mentally about watching too much TV that like at the beginning it was awesome. And then I just got so burnt out, and maybe it was a mental block where I wasn't happy with anything I was watching, which was problematic because what else was I going to do? So I joined this website called Book of the Month, and I was really happy that I did in July because it sends you, they sort of curate their selections, and every month they, give you 5 options, and you pick the one you want, and they send it to you, and then there are obviously add-ons, and I just really found it so fun to do. They were great at picking, and it resulted in a book that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I cannot recommend enough. It's called Anxious People. It's so good. Everybody should read it. But that's basically been my year. I mean, it's pretty much my year in books. I don't feel like I have any TV recommendations because I was just I couldn't find any. I didn't know what to
do. I mean, good TV, no. In terms of like bad TV, things I really enjoyed watching, I was absolutely on the Tiger King train. My sister and I
forgot that was this year. Again, that feels like it was so long ago.
It was so early. No, that's a good point, Lenore. It was a lot of like, if I'm being honest, I did a lot of reality shows at the beginning, which I never do. And I found it good escapism. And then I was like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I have no like masterpieces to recommend. I just thought it was just so fun and so crazy. My sister and I, we watched it, I think the whole thing in maybe like 2 days.
Wow, I did forget that was this year.
Yeah,
Those were
again,
fun.
like, yeah, it just seems like that was so long ago.
All year's a blur.
Well, thank you for that book recommendation, Brecken. My mom is also in Book of the Month Club, and I think it's great, and I think it's great that she's in it because then she gives me all the books.
Oh yeah, there you go. I know my roommate's in it too, so we swap. So we actually get two.
Two
When I
for
refer
one.
her. Yeah,
Very
if you
nice.
guys want it, I'll refer you because then I get a free book.
Oh, yeah,
Great.
please do. That can be on your to-do list this afternoon.
Okay, I can handle that for sure.
I too like to read, and I've read a lot of books this year. I actually write down the name of every book I read because I try to do at least 30 books a year. I'm not going to make it this year. But I read a couple longer books, so I feel okay about that. But for some reason, in true 2020 fashion, I'm drawing a complete blank on anything. I read a couple books I enjoyed. The Radium Girls, I definitely would recommend to anyone in industry. I don't know where my copiers are. I would grab it. Lenore, you're very organized over there. Like Lenore, I thought that this year was a great year to kind of reconnect with family and friends, like even if that was virtually. I spent a lot of time with a friend of mine, Mel, a very good old friend of mine that I've known since college. So that was a lot of fun. We went on a camping trip in July when things were kind of feeling better. And one of my, I don't know, I mean, it was a low light for her. It was like a point of interest for me. She got, and you guys remember the story, she got bit by a copperhead and had to be medevaced out of the campsite. So that was definitely the kind of one of the craziest things that happened to me this year. I never knew anybody who's bitten by a poisonous snake until 2020, but I feel like that's really fitting. And then, yeah, it was, if there was any year to get bitten by a poisonous snake, I think this was the year.
For sure.
So movies and TV, I haven't watched a lot of TV. I have been trying to read and like I mentioned earlier, getting stuff done around my apartment, but I saw Judy with Renee Zellweger. And if anybody hasn't seen it, I didn't, film myself. I'm not a big Judy Garland fan. I wasn't going to watch it. And then one night I was like, okay, well, Renee Zellweger won the Oscar for this. Let me check it out. She is phenomenal. She blew that role off the screen. It is excellent. And if anybody hasn't seen Judy, fantastic.
My list too.
Yeah. So, and then TV, my best friend had been after me forever to watch The Americans. And The Americans, phenomenal. I binged the whole series, I think 6 seasons. Kerry Russell, Matthew Rhys, I think is his name. Excellent. Put it on your list. And it's also, I think, a good thing to kind of watch in a chain because you have to remember a lot of like the characters and what they're up to. And I think it'd be a hard thing to finish one season and have to wait months for the next season. So I think you got a really good picture of why everything was happening if you watched it all at once. It's heavy, but it's worth it. And then I also watched Fosse Verdon, which would be one of those things, like I'm not a big musical person, but it's about Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon. And it's, Michelle Williams and I can't remember the name of the actor, Sam Rockwell, and it was excellent. So, and that's only 6 or 8 episodes. You can watch that. You can watch that in 2 days. If anybody's needing anything to watch this winter.
Yeah, that fills up our December. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. So let's wrap it up with New Year's resolutions. Is anyone making anyone, or anyone making any?
I don't know if I have resolutions per se as much as, to you guys' point about the pandemic sort of forcing us to sort of take a step back. You're spending more time with your family. And I think for me, it was realizing when you're forced to do nothing that you really, I think in the New York lifestyle, you get so caught up and you sort of run. And more often than not, you're on the move. And so I think sort of taking a step back and realizing that like I need to take more time for myself was a lesson to learn that I would like to move forward with. And then I think probably like everybody else, you miss what is around you so much. And I feel like sitting in your apartment while New York City is around you made me realize like this is so the opposite of what I just said, but that I also wasn't doing enough and taking advantage enough of like all the amazing things that we have in the city. So I just really like to get back to that as soon as we can, seeing plays and like supporting whatever I can around here. I miss it.
Yeah. That makes sense. But I know what you're meaning. Like, you don't mean running, just mindlessly running from thing to thing, but like really thoughtfully, like taking advantage of what the city has to offer, not just running around like a chicken with your head cut off, which is what you end up doing in New York City most of the time.
Yeah, like all grocery shopping, like we said, it's just constantly buying groceries.
Done with that. Instacart, Bracken, I'm buzz marketing it again.
Okay, I'm on it.
I'm not huge on New Year's resolutions. I don't really like them. But I think going forward, I would just like to be a little more positive. I think this was just a really hard year for so many people for so many reasons, with just so much going on. But I think at the end of the day, there is still so much to be grateful for. And I think I would just like to be a little better about keeping that at the forefront of my mind for the coming year.
That's
Yeah,
a good one, Lenore.
being grateful is a really great practice.
Yeah.
For me, I love New Year's resolutions. So, and then I love to be disappointed when I don't fulfill these very lofty goals I have for myself, which is very me. So I think I want to try to, and I'm not going to do this, but it's something to keep in mind, to try to make every day memorable in some way. Like, even if that's just like going, like I live right by Prospect Park now, like if there's been just a work day and there's nothing really happening, and we're tired of TV and I'm not really reading a good book, like go for a walk in the park, like see what you can see. There's always something going on in Prospect Park, that's for sure. You'll always see something interesting if you look around. And also it's just a place to get lost in nature. So do something a little every day, just to like a little, make it a little memorable. And also, like, this has become terrible, like try to get out of my house at least once a day, even if it's just for a walk. But like, don't let so many days pass where I'm like, oh, I haven't even gone downstairs to check my mail.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Great about that.
Yeah, need to do that too. It's so easy to get sucked into.
Yeah, and you just finish the workday and you turn your computer off and you turn your TV on, or you go sit and read a book, or you start dinner. And then it's especially hard right now. Obviously this is going to change, but here in New York it's dark at 4:30.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's just easy to just be like, oh, well, it's dark out now, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah, true.
Well, thank you guys so much. Thanks again to Rdi Diamonds for sponsoring, and thanks to all our listeners, readers who were with us this year. We know it was a hard one. Thank you so much. And Brecca and Lenore, Ashley and Absentia, thank you guys so much for all your hard work this year. It's really appreciated. And I hope everybody has a very happy holiday and a happy new year. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michelle. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
For tuning in.